Welcome home, where we provide information, inspiration, and motivator after motivator after motivator here on America's Next. I have Janice Goldwater here with me today. How you doing, Janice?
Wonderful. Thank you, Cedric, so much for inviting me to be on your show. I'm so excited.
Yeah, I am too. It's a pleasure to meet you. And you look good. You sound good. So let's all discover your story. Where you from?
I live in Silver Spring, Maryland now, but I grew up in New Jersey and lived there for my whole childhood. Then went to college in upstate New York, and then social work school in St. Louis, Missouri. Then lived in Florida for about 3 years and came to Maryland, I think it was in 1983. And so Maryland's been my home for many years now.
Okay. I've heard a variety of stories about life in New Jersey and what it's like going up there, growing up there. What was it like for you?
I grew up over the George Washington Bridge in Bergen County, in a town called Bridgewood, which was a kind of small bedroom community to New York City. And it was a quiet, suburban kind of a community. My parents chose it because the school system was good. And it was an interesting growing up experience. At the time that I lived there, it was very homogeneous, racially, religiously, and there was two minorities in our school. One was a young man in my class, a young man named Skipper Battles, who was Black. The other was me, who was Jewish. So he and I were the outsiders, and everybody else was white and Christian. And so it was an interesting place to grow up. And we were definitely a family who was an other. And I think probably one of the highlights of my growing up in that community was when I met my friend Jane in 6th grade, and she was my first Jewish friend. And like having somebody who also didn't celebrate Christmas and who also, was different than the other kids. It was really wonderful. And she's still my best friend today,
Okay.
this many years later.
Well, good morning to Jane too. I'm sure she'll be watching this episode at some point and supporting you stopping by here. Now, Janice, I think I have an idea of what it's like to be a Black person or an African-American person growing up in America, going to suburban schools or not going to suburban schools. But I have no idea what it's like to grow up Jewish and to also feel like a minority. So can you talk to me a little bit about what it means to grow up Jewish and what's it look like overall?
Sure. So for me, growing up Jewish meant that on the outside, I looked the same as the other white kids. And I didn't grow up in a particularly observant family. I did grow up in a family where we had a strong identity of our cultural and our religious practices, but we were sort of like Hanukkah, Passover, the Rosh Hashanah. Like there was the high holidays is when we practiced,
Okay.
but what it meant was that at Christmas time, at Easter, every house on the street had lights on it except ours. It meant that on Sunday morning, everybody went to church. We didn't. It meant that some of the kids' families didn't want them playing with me. It meant that when we moved into the community, a lot of people were concerned because they thought, there was a different ethnic group moving in. They thought it would somehow impact the community. So it's, the other day I had this beautiful opportunity to reflect. I've been thinking so much lately about what does it mean to be have an anti-racist or an anti-other practice? How does bias come in? And the other day I was I was talking to my board of directors, and I was talking about a foundation that was considering supporting us. And one of the questions they had was, what's the ethnicity of your senior leadership of the organization, and what's the ethnicity of all the board members? And so the question was, well, how did that feel? And I said, oh my goodness, it felt really uncomfortable to me because I have the whole history of the Holocaust in my DNA. I have the whole feeling of being other in my DNA. And the words that came out of my mouth were, oh, I felt so exposed. As those words were coming out of my mouth, I realized that the three people I was talking to were not white. They did not have the choice to say whether or to disclose. And I thought, oh my God, that's privilege. That was a privilege. And as the words came out, I had this tremendous awareness that, growing up as a Jewish person who also is seen as a white person, I think is different than growing up as somebody in another racial group, because I had the choice. I can remember being at a vulnerable time in my life where I wanted to fit in really badly. And I had a friend who said, I'm not allowed to bring Jewish kids home. And I said, that's okay. Like, tell your parents I'm a Unitarian. And like, if I was Black, if I was brown, I would not have had that choice. So, as those words came tumbling out of my mouth, my brain was like, oh my goodness, Janice, blind spot, blind spot, blind spot. And so I immediately stopped myself, took a breath, and said, oh my goodness, I am so sorry. Like, I had a blind spot. And
you know what? I think that your ability to reevaluate the moment and to reevaluate in the moment is very admirable. And I think we all can take from that, hey, sometimes you need to reevaluate yourself in the moment. Sometimes you need to reevaluate the moment and make it a better moment.
Absolutely.
And it sounds like you did that. I think that's phenomenal.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now,
thank you.
For sure. Now, can you talk to me about some other experiences that you had in your life? Did you have any conversations with your parents that helped you to grow into the type of adult who's able to reevaluate the moment?
That is such a beautiful question. Like, thinking about, growing up, how do we become who we are today? I was always the see something, say something, do something kind of a kid. I was kind of in people's faces. I think I was probably called obnoxious. I pushed I pushed the limits, the rules, the everything, and I was probably not the easiest kid to raise. And I think that sometimes it's those kids that are not the easiest to raise are the ones who are the most curious. And they're the ones who are saying, hey, wait a minute, like I'm not going to just accept the status quo. I'm going to push a little further. And so there was my parents, I come from a family that was stable, where there was a lot of love, that was very community oriented. My parents spent a lot of their time on social action, on working within the community. They were involved politically, they were involved as volunteers, and they modeled taking care of people, looking outside of ourselves, of giving back. My grandfather was an immigrant. My mother's father, he came over on a boat at the age of 16 from Eastern Europe, escaping the life there. And so she grew up, um, with a father who was sort of, started out pushing a cart, on the street, and, in an immigrant family. And so my parents were both, had the opportunity to be loved and nurtured, and valued education, valued their children very much. I'm one of four, I'm number two. Um, and they had time to listen to us, to nurture us, and to give us the opportunities we needed to really grow.
Mhm.
And I think that was a hugely important piece of my childhood, was that, you know someone had my back. you know Someone had my back. They had my back on a good day when things went well. They had my back on a bad day when things didn't go well, when I got in trouble, which, I did. And, you know,
Yeah, as we do, as we
as
do.
we do, as we do.
Do you have brothers and sisters?
I do. I have three sisters. So
Okay.
there's four of us. I'm the second. I have one who lives in Arizona and two who live in Florida. My dad is still alive today. He's 96. He's still involved in social action. And it was so interesting. When after the conversation really elevated, after George Floyd's murder, and he he said, I don't think I'm a racist, but I wonder what I don't know. I wonder what I don't know. And I thought, oh my God, you're 96 years old and you're being curious. You're being curious. So we had a great conversation. So he said, well, how do I figure out what I don't know? He said, like, what's your average middle class person supposed to do to figure out what they don't know? So I said, well, Dad, are you thinking about your average middle class white person or black person? He said, oh, I was thinking about a white person. Maybe that's my first lesson.
Mm-hmm.
And I just, I feel like to have had and still have that gift of a parent who's curious, who's curious. And like, that's the whole thing, like being curious, to look, to always be asking why, and is there a way to look at it differently? What do I know? What do I not know?
Right. Yeah, that's huge.
It's
When,
huge.
when you go out there in search of what you don't know, the end result is that you become a new person,
Absolutely.
and you end up getting in the driver's seat of your own change in your own life. You know, I think one of the most dangerous things that we can do as a human people is to not go out there and learn new things, not go out there and want to leave the neighborhood that you grew up in. You
That's
know,
right.
you have to want to go out there and see the world. You have to want to go out there, experience new people, experience new foods, you know, because those are the ways that you grow. Now, you've mentioned social action a couple times. What is social action?
To me, social action is involvement. To me, social action is seeing something that you recognize that is not right and doing something about it.
Okay.
It is everything from investing your resources, if you have money, it is investing your brain power by and your time power, your physical power. So, your physical strength. If you have physical strength, it's getting involved. It's not sitting back. Social action is as simple as, I remember one day back in a lot of years ago, I lived in St. Petersburg, Florida for some years, and my parents lived in Miami. So we were driving back after Thanksgiving, and as we were driving down this road called Alligator Alley, which is like a kind of a narrow highway that goes between the East Coast and the West Coast of Florida, I noticed there was a man lying on the side of the road with his head on his suitcase. And it was really hot. And we started to drive by, and I thought, no, something doesn't look right. So we pulled over and came up and approached him. And I could see he was sort of foaming at the mouth and clearly was having a medical problem. So that was before cell phones. So what we did was we drove to and found a phone, called an ambulance, then came back. And once we pulled over, other people started pulling over. We stayed with him till the ambulance came. And I think they said he had had a seizure. My sister said, oh, I saw that guy, because she also lived in Florida, and she also drove on that same highway 30 minutes before we did. Mm-hmm. She said, oh, I saw that guy flying out, and thinking, that's a strange place to be sunbathing on the side of the highway. For at least 30 minutes, people drove right past him and no one stopped. Social action is seeing something and doing something. And it was interesting because once we stopped, other people stopped. And so it's being the one who recognizes something and then does something about it, takes action, even when it's scary. And the truth is, I was a little scared to approach him because I didn't know, like, did he have a gun? Was he, there's so many stories out there of people who look like they're in distress and then they hurt the person who comes to help them. So there's always that debate, what's safe, what's not safe. How do I reach out to a fellow human being who's struggling?
Yeah. I think I like that in you. I like that in you. That you decide consistently in your life to be the person who looks and goes to fix something. You decide to be that person. You're not talking to me about how you passed the buck, about how you continue down the road. You're talking to me about how you stop and you decide to make a difference by doing what you can do. And how when you do that, other people, lo and behold, start coming to support and start to do the same thing. So now I'm reminded that when you, and this is for people in the audience or people who watch this episode in retrospect, decide to be an agent of change, then you subliminally give other people permission to become an agent of change as well. So it's not always that you expect change out there in the world to just happen. A lot of the time, it's about you stopping in your tracks and seeing what you can do to make a change in your community. So this is who we're talking to, ladies and gentlemen. Janice Goldwater is somebody who's decided to be a change agent. We have a lot more information coming from her throughout this episode, but already early in her life, she's somebody who understands her differences, understands her history as somebody who has went through adversity and is on the lookout for ways that she don't even know about, ways that she can make a difference. So now, what was college like for you?
I was so not ready to go to college when I went to college. So my birthday is October 31st, Halloween, which means that I started school when I was 4. And it means I graduated high school when I was 17. And it means I went to college when I was 17. I was not ready to go to college. So what college looked like for me initially was a great place to party. It was a great opportunity to go to not study, to just be a child who should not have been on her own at that time. And it was very difficult. I went to the first college I went to was a small college in upstate New York. And I lasted there for about 3 semesters and then switched to another college, in fact, where my sister was, because I was so messy. And once I switched to the other school, I found an amazing community. I was a sociology major, and that's where I began to find my way. I had a couple of college professors who saw me. They saw me for the human being that I was. And, I remember one of them, there was two of them. One, his name was Jules Bergevin, and the other was Julian Ewell. They were both sociology professors at Ithaca College, and they took a personal interest in me, and it made all the difference. Just having a teacher who said, I see you, I care about you. Wow, you're really smart. I was not a very high achiever in high school. I mean, I was anxious all the time. I felt tremendous social pressures to fit in, and academics were not my thing. Mm-hmm. When I got to Ithaca College and had these two professors who they resonated with me in terms of the classes they taught, again, sociology, social action, being, Jules Bergevin, and I don't know if he's still alive today, he was instrumental in saying, if you see something, say something, do something. He inspired me. He allowed me he gave me the path to take my energy, which was tremendous. And it was tremendously in areas that were not necessarily serving me, but to take that and to focus it in areas that would serve me so I could channel that positive energy, or that energy, make it positive and make a difference. So it was during that time in college that I had an internship at the Department of Social Services, that I, in the foster care unit. It was during that time that I worked for a summer in a housing, low-income housing community with the kids. It was during that time that I was given assignments that forced me to, or encouraged me to reflect on myself. Who am I? Where did I come from? And it's interesting today, I'm involved in a lot of learning around anti-racist leadership, and I'm doing this fabulous program right now through a group called Leadership Greater Washington that I belong to, and we're doing this 6-month training program, and around looking at anti-racist leadership and looking at our own practice and what we can do differently. And one of the first exercises was to really examine our childhood and where we came from and how we learned to function in the world. And when I think about college and I think about Julian Ewell, he gave me assignments that, I still have them because I'm a little pack radish. Hard for me to get rid of things.
Okay.
But I have that paper that talks about growing up and the privilege that I had and the challenges that I had, and sort of how I came to be, who I was back then at the age of 20, 19, 20,
Sure.
21.
Sure. Now, when you started talking about how you were always amongst the youngest people in your class, it was at that moment where I began to feel even more of a connection to you, because I have a daughter who's also amongst the youngest in her class. And I often think about how to help her deal with the anxiety of being the youngest. You represent hope for people who happen to be amongst the youngest. And I want you to talk to our parents out there about tips that they can employ to help their young person who might be amongst the youngest in their class.
Sure. I mean, one thing is there is some choice in how much we push our kids. Mm-hmm. And there's so much pressure, everywhere to go, 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 go. And so I think really being aware of that. And I didn't, I remember there was no time that anybody said, should we keep you back a year? There was no time. And so, like, if you have a child who's the youngest and they're struggling, if there's any way to slow things down for them so they don't, because it's a pressure that is not necessarily required.
Okay.
You know, that's not necessarily required. And depending on how young your daughter is, if what the ramifications would be. I mean, like, my parents never wanted me to stay back because, and I would have never wanted to stay back because I would have felt like it was a failure. But maybe even like having had a gap year between going from high school to college, like, and just thinking about the expectations, we're in such a hurry. When I look at myself in my own life, I was 17 when I graduated high school. I was 21 when I graduated college. I was 23 when I had my master's degree. I got married when I was 23. I had my first child when I was 26. I'm like, and like, it was because of that much pressure. So really slowing down enough to look at what are the rules what's society saying to us about how fast we're achieving something? Because the truth is, this moment is the only moment that really exists. What happened earlier past, what's going to happen hasn't happened yet. So listening, really seeing your children, listening to them, being aware of how much you're pushing. So in my case, my mother never finish going to college. She went to college. She probably wasn't ready. She went to college. She partied too much. She left college. She went back. She partied too much. She lost her privilege to go back and then regretted it afterwards. So she actually did finish college when she was about 52. She returned to college as an adult and got her degree, which made her really happy.
Wow.
But what she did for us as her children was push us really hard. You are not going to make the same mistake I did. That was her message. And in that, she probably had a little of a blind spot, like all of us parents do. I don't know about you, but for me, there's nothing worse than seeing my children suffer. And if I watch them make a mistake that I've already made, it's even harder. And yet, it's when we look back on our own lives, it's living through adversity, living through mistakes, living through those moments that give us skills to manage the really hard moments.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. We have a comment from Yolanda Riley. She says, don't let society put unrealistic timelines on you. And I couldn't agree with that more. It sounds like you are also along that sentiment, Janice. And so to all of our audience members out there, be reminded by Janice today that we have to be mindful of the anxieties that our children are facing right now in the pandemic, but also in general. How do they feel amongst the sea of other young people who are in school? And how are they going to be feeling when they become a senior in high school? Do they need a gap year? I thought that was huge for you to mention that, that you can take a gap year. I think that's something to truly put inside of our toolbox. And Yolanda Riley says, absolutely. So we are going to take a brief break. You guys tap somebody on the shoulder, send a text message, and let them know that we're talking to Janice Goldwater. She is bold and she is awesome. We'll be right back after this brief message. America's Next Motivator. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern. Tuesday and Thursday at 10 a.m. Eastern. America's Next Motivator, hosted by me, Cedric Riley, and sponsored by the Pride Empowerment Network. And we're back. Janice, how you feeling out there?
Oh, I feel fabulous. I'm so thrilled to be here. This is so much fun.
Yeah, we're having a good time. One thing I really like about you is that you talk about race easily. You get right out there in front of it. And a lot of people they avoid the R word, they avoid the B word, they avoid all the ABC words out there. But in order to make the world a better place, we have to begin to talk about the subjects that are impacting us in the back of our minds, that are impacting us deep in our hearts. And so when you use your position in society that you are going to step onto the platform and talk about something like anti-racist leadership, I think that we should all pull up a chair and listen to what you're talking about. Now, what is the anti-racist leadership movement? Where is it and where is it going?
The anti-racist leadership movement is about, it starts with self-reflection. It starts with learning about bias. It starts with learning and understanding sort of what's behind racism and all the isms.
Mhm.
Because the truth is, our brains are wired for safety. And one of the things that I love is understanding the brain, because by understanding the brain, I can contextualize and understand so much about how I feel and how other people feel. So our brains are, our oldest part of our brain is the lower brain, is always scanning the universe for danger. And so it's sort of the primitive part of the brain that kept us safe from big wild animals when we lived together with them. And it tells us when there's smoke. It tells us when there's something dangerous, and tells us to take action. So anyway, it's always scanning the environment. It's always scanning the environment for danger. And so we learn what's safe and what's not safe in our childhood.
Mhm.
And so if we think about the messages that we get about what's safe and what's not safe, it could be what someone looks like, it could be someone's size, it could be how they're dressed, it could be any number of variables that's deeply embedded within our brain. So the first step is recognizing it, and realizing that the only way that we're going to ever work through our bias is by making it speakable to ourselves to say, ooh, this is something that feels scary to me. And then at that point, we can say, is this a scary situation? No. And then we can take a step past it. So anti-racist leadership recognizes that bias exists. Bias isn't bad. Bias is part of being a human being. What we can do, though, is we can't make the bias part of our brain go away. What we can do is we can recognize it, and then we can intentionally choose to not go with that bias.
And this is very important to you because you currently are in the child welfare space. And out of 440,000 youth in the foster care system today, overwhelming percentage of them are minorities. And so I see where anti-racist leadership is key when you're looking at potentially a lot of white executives or people who are not necessarily a reflection of the population who are in control of the lives of other people.
That's
So
right.
I think that's great.
Great. And so with another study group that I'm working with through a group called the Adoption Exchange Association, we're doing with the leadership of a fabulous woman named Tony Oliver, who I highly recommend that you might want her on the show. She is a completely inspirational leader. She started and ran an organization in the Atlanta area called Roots, and she's been around for a lot of years. We're having conversations where we're drilling down and looking at how do families come in the child welfare system? What are the biases that staff have as they look at people? And there's a lot of interesting kinds of things that when you change the lens ever so subtly, it changes what things look like. So there's some organizations that have stopped, and from the child protection area, removed race as they're evaluating a family, to take out, when they're reading a summary of a family. There's some that have taken out ethnicity, or whatever, like looking at any different variable. For me, at Adoptions Together, inclusivity has always been one of the core principles from when we started. And we've really been drilling down since day one, because I worked in the field. Do you want me to, is it too soon to talk about?
No, go ahead.
Okay. So when I finished social work school, I worked for about 3 years as a therapist in a community mental health center. And I never dreamed about doing anything except being a therapist. And then after my first son was born, I totally fell in love with being a mother, and all of a sudden children looked really different to me. And then I started doing adoption home studies for people who wanted to adopt kids. And then I found my way into the field of adoption and permanency, and worked in a number of different settings, and saw there was real disparities for majority race people. In talking about the Washington, D.C. area, Maryland, D.C., Virginia, in the 1980s, I'm talking about, if there was a parent who had an unintended pregnancy and wanted to consider a voluntary adoption plan for her child, she'd call agencies and say, I'd like to consider adoption for my child. If she was white, there was lots of options. If she wasn't, she was referred to social services. And that was, to me, the most egregious thing I had experienced as a social worker. So, and even kids that had medical issues, behavioral issues, they went to social services, and that healthy majority race kids would go to the private sector and be served. So I started Adoptions Together in 1990 to welcome every child who was in need of a family, regardless of any single variable. So that meant that we had children of all races. We had children of all health statuses. It was around the time we had a big problem in our community with crack cocaine. There was babies being abandoned in the hospitals, and they would often spend 6, 9, 12 months before they even got out of the hospital, before they even, just getting into a family. So
hold up. Did you say that babies were in the hospital for 6 months after being born before they could ever get out?
Yep.
We have to be reminded of the sense of urgency that's needed for young Black people, African Americans, however you want to term it, in the child welfare system, and understand that hundreds of thousands of young Black children's lives are being damaged. They're not being repaired. People aren't coming to the aid because of the color of their skin, because of what you think might have been precipitating factors to their birth. It's unfair. And we need people like Janice Goldwater to step up and to found organizations with a clear lens about the work that we need to do for Black people, anti-racist leadership, to make America and the world a better place. Now, what I've done is I've went out there and I found a video that describes a little bit about her organization, Adoptions Together. And I'm going to play that video. You guys give me 1 second. 1 second.
It's the greatest things that happen to us in our lives. it put our family together. I mean, it was a dream to have a family, and this was a great way to do it.
The day that Grant was placed in our arms in May of 2006, that's a day that we will never forget.
So we were like overwhelmed and so happy, and then we met him, and it was the greatest day of our life. And then we had a second greatest day of our life.
At Adoptions Together, we recognize that there's no one kind of family. We believe that children need parents and children grow best in families. We welcome every child, every family, every step of the way. And we know that raising a family is a lifelong process.
Adoptions Together provides services from the beginning to the end. Adoptions Together have a wonderful support program that are not only here doing the beginning steps, they're here until your child becomes an adult. And you offer such wonderful seminars, even for families like myself where we are out of state. We still feel as though that we can turn to Adoptions Together for support. There is no such thing as the perfect child. There's the perfect for your child, but there's no such thing as the perfect child. And when people go into adoptions and they really don't understand some of the difficulties and the adjustments and the challenges of the needs that the child might have, it's not as easy or as successful for the families. And I think Adoptions Together does an excellent job with preparing their families to take on the role as an adoptive parent.
It's just another way that we have a family. And you know, it comes with challenges. Every kid comes with their own challenges and their own strengths and their own, ways of looking at things.
And so we've gone through the process and did our parenting classes and found out that we could actually be parents. Yay! Rick was on the computer and he was looking at Wednesday's Child and different things like that. And he was watching an episode of Wednesday's Child when he saw Alex. And I was in another room of the house and he says, Ross, come here. So I go trucking over and say, what? He says, look. He said, here's our son. He said he just, didn't know what it was, but he just said he knew that this was the one.
And every time we look into our son's eyes, we know that he is the child that was meant for us. And that's something that we remind him of.
The families that work for Adoptions Together, right? Wired up someplace else.
So, a lot of fun. Enough to make us want to absolutely do it again.
Across the United States, there's 112,000 children who are waiting for parents of their own. And we need you to step forward if you are somebody that has room in your heart, in your family, to welcome another child.
Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you something. I am on your bandwagon. That's right. Save our children. Save my brothers and sisters. Save the young people who didn't ask to be in this world, who are being hurt by unsafe environments. Save them. Find it in your heart to get involved. Reach out to Adoptions Together. Make your life even more valuable by bringing somebody else in. Adopt somebody. Save these children's lives. Janice, talk to us about your organization and what we were looking at.
Sure. So that was actually a picnic. Every year we have a picnic and we bring together our families. In fact, that one family said they were from out of the area. I think every year they come to the picnic. They drive all the way from North Carolina. So at Adoptions Together, we find parents for kids on up from newborns up to 21. I mean, we work directly with kids that are in foster care locally and around the country, and build families like that. We also have family finding programs where we reconnect children to and youth to extended family members. We have a detective on our team. We utilize all kinds of family finding techniques. I saw you had Kevin Campbell involved. We love his work. We believe that children need families. We also believe that families need support. So we really do two things. We really do three things. One, we work with families who are struggling to try to keep them together. First, because adoption, kids in the best case scenario grow up in their first family. And sometimes that's not possible. So when that's not possible, other forms of permanency are a great option. We do the child placement, we reconnect youth to lifelong connections. So we create family structures around kids. And then we provide what we say every child, every family, every step of the way. The every step of the way means that we have counseling services and training programs and coaching services and groups. Like we have a transracial adoptive family group that's been meeting for a number of years, and the kids are growing up with, getting together every month. Now it's all virtual during the pandemic, but we have regular programming for the kids and for the parents. And then we've got the parents studying anti-racist. Like, what does it mean to be a different race than your child? But we've been working on this for years. And having the long-term support. Having the long-term support. Because while the process of creating permanency is sort of a one-time thing, it's got lifelong implications. Where we started, where we end up, and where we go, it's a continuum. And our services provide a continuum of care.
Absolutely. How many young people would you say that you all have assisted in becoming adopted?
So we've assisted about more than 8,000 children since we started in 30 years. Of those children, probably about 6,000 have been legally adopted. The other 2,000, maybe about 2,200, have stayed in their birth families with our intervention. We've created lifelong connections. When I look at what's the success of our intervention, the success of our intervention is that a child has a family, that a child has a stable family, that a child is going to be able to live in safety and, have enough to eat, have their needs met. And sometimes that's within the first family. Sometimes that's within part of the extended family. Sometimes that's with an adoptive family. Sometimes with our older youth who are unfortunately looking at aging out. That's the thing that makes me crazy. I hate if anybody ages out of foster care because I feel like that's such a failure of our system. We remove these kids, but then we don't get them reconnected. And how can any human being be expected to step out of foster care at the age of 21 and make it?
Absolutely. Now, do we say we are making the lives of these young people a little bit better, but how do we make their lives great? Are we doing enough to make young people who are in the foster care system, their lives great?
No, there is more we need to do to make their lives great. First of all, we need to make sure that nobody ages out. Nobody leaves the system without some kind of family system and family support. Nobody leaves the system without a family to go home to. Doesn't have to be a legal family. It's got to be a family who says, I got your back. I told you in the beginning, my parents have my back. Every kid needs somebody in the world to have their back. So we're going to be great when we have a system that looks at not just the physical well-being, the psychological well-being, but the family support piece of the equation. So nobody leaves the system without someone that's got their back.
Without a doubt. I'm on fire right now.
Yeah.
We are getting a lot of comments in the building, a lot of love and support for you this morning. I want to let you know that I spent years of my life in foster care before being adopted at the age of 15. And so I have a lot of the experiences that you're discussing, whether it be an unstable or unsafe environment, and then foster care, and then being adopted as a teenager. I definitely support adoption. I'd like to appreciate everybody who's become an adoptive parent and commend you for seeing that nobody should be aging out of foster care. When you age out, it means that you're homeless. More often than not, it means you're homeless. It means that the young people, especially that you see around the homeless shelters, the young people you see, in and out of your local Cuyahoga or county jails, those young people are on the streets. They're on the streets. They don't know where to go to use the bathroom. They don't know how to get $5. They don't know how to put utilities in their name. They don't know how to run a household. They have an identity crisis. This is what makes our space, the child welfare space, a liability to society. We have to reevaluate what's going on, and we have to create a profound solution that enables the child welfare space to be an asset to our economy. So let's continue to look at our leadership styles. Let's continue to include the ideas of youth who've been in foster care. Let's embrace one another, and let's make this right. Janice, we are rounding third base here, and I've really enjoyed our conversation today. I just got a couple more questions for you.
Okay.
When it comes to making child welfare a better experience for youth and families, is it okay to do something new?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
It's always okay to try something new, because when we get stuck in the status quo, we can put up blinders. We need to, curiosity is the key to change. Curiosity is the key to change. Staying curious. What could we do differently to have a different outcome? When the outcomes are not coming out, I mean, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and having the same outcome. That's,
Yeah, absolutely.
So absolutely, change is good.
Okay. And so now we're rounding third base. What is survival to you?
Survival is having human connection. Survival is having our physical needs met and our psychological needs for connection. We, as animals, we are wired for connection. There's something called interpersonal neurobiology, how you feel like we're getting really excited together right now because we're both so deeply passionate and our brains are feeding right off of each other. So survival is having another brain to feed off of, having a human connection, and having our bodies have enough food and safety so we can thrive. But it's not, we know that without human connection, we're barely surviving.
Okay. We've got 20 seconds left. What is success to you?
Success is every human being having a connection to another human being. Success is us working together, us hearing, us seeing, us recognizing that all of our voices matter, and that together we are so much stronger.
What is greatness to you?
Greatness is when we can all work together for the benefit of us all, when we all matter.
You know what, Janice Goldwater? I've listened to your story today. I've learned new things about you, and I've been inspired by your journey. Everybody out there in the audience, get your crown emojis ready. I want to let you know that I'm giving you your crown today while you're still living, giving you your respect today while you can still acknowledge it. I'm letting the world know that you, Janice Goldwater, are America's next motivator.
Oh, thank you, Cedric. That's like the nicest thing anybody ever said. I feel so deeply appreciative and have so much gratitude. You inspire me. You inspire me so much. And I feel like the luckiest person in the world to have spent this hour with you. Thank you.
Wow. Thanks for stopping by today, all right?
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Each and every episode of America's Next Motivator is going to have something here for you. All you've got to do, just like you did today, is stop by and pick it up.